All right, so let's go ahead and get today's show started. So everybody, welcome back, our friends, to the show that never ends. And it is just great to see everybody here already today. So then, like I said, there's a lot of people that are busy out on vacations and got notes from them all, and that I'm sending them all my best wishes, which has been really delightful. So let's go ahead, and because it is late there in the UK, let's go ahead and start with Fiona, and then tell us a little bit, if you can, since I was hoping to have Pierre on, but I'm not, Carly on, but I don't see him on. So just for everybody else's benefit, go ahead and tell us a little bit about what's happening in Europe and what the effects are, and does it have any effects on EMS specifically?
The climate issues, we're not seeing any problems at the moment. The problems that we're having are around industrial action. So today was the last day of 5 days of industrial action by junior doctors, and they have been now given an offer of 6% plus some cash, which they feel is not sufficient, and I completely understand their position. The consultants go on strike at the end of the week. So
wow, that's okay.
That's probably the first time that's ever happened. The impact of the junior doctors strike has actually been pretty minimal in terms of its impact on EMS. The impact on elective care has been much more significant, and we have a massive backlog for elective surgery in particular.
And again, for everybody else's purposes, when she's saying junior doctors, it doesn't mean like residents and interns. They're just sort of like early career people, whereas the consultants are the more senior career people. And so yeah, go ahead.
That's correct, Paul. Junior doctors are everybody up to the grade of consultant.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so people who've been in training for 8-10 years.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So because a lot of times they may interpret that here as being, some residents and all that resident, but this is so it's significant. It's a large part of the healthcare system that's been impacted. Now, that's why when you told me just now the consultants were striking, that's the first time I've ever heard of that ever. Yeah, so is that a first for sure?
It is. It's not uniform across the consultant body. There are some groups who are more militant than others, so specifically anaesthetists and obstetricians. So that will again impact on elective care. The impact of the junior doctors strike has been mitigated very much by cover being provided by consultants. So certainly in EDs, you've had consultants and consultant physicians taking the roles that junior doctors previously would have taken. And actually, that's made emergency departments run much more smoothly.
Interesting. Okay. Well, in the past, when people were striking, or when they first started bringing up things like resident hours, it often would be in the specialties, quite frankly, that were more like hour oriented, like in radiology or psychiatry or anesthesiology, like you're saying, etc. And less so amongst surgeons and to some extent some internist groups and so on. Have you seen the same trend there, or is it just across the board?
In amongst the junior doctors, it's been across the board, and we are seeing real difficulties with retention, not just with junior doctors, but a lot of consultants are looking to take early retirement. We're having real difficulty with general practice and persuading people to do that. So the health service is not in a great place just at the moment.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's just been trending downwards over the last 2 or 3 years as well. And that, I mean, to some extent, we're seeing some of the same things here. Let me just jump up to Mick then. And Mick, how about on your end? Are you seeing some of the same issues playing out there as well? Because I know you guys were looking for more, more funding for the doctors as well.
No, the opposite. In fact, the contracts were agreed. Some minor issues about some of the terms, but the salary structure is quite good. The difficulty is trying to recruit into what is effectively a very small health service. But with the issues happening in the UK, we're finding that there's quite a few people from there trying to move over here now.
Okay. So, but you did have problems before with the salaries that you guys were getting, though, particularly in emergency services as well for the work that you were putting in.
Yeah,
correct?
so there was a very specific issue that arose about 10 years ago where overnight one minister decided to cut new attending salaries by 40%.
Right. Yeah, right. That's right.
And because it didn't affect anybody in a job, the medical unions and trade forces couldn't do anything about it, because you can only have an industrial action about a thing that will actually affect you personally.
Yes.
But this was the gray area where when you hadn't applied for the new job, you couldn't have an action. When you're in the job, you couldn't have an action. So they hit the sweet spot and got away with that for about 10 years, but realized they haven't been able to fill 1,000 attending posts since then. And that has now enabled us to be able to negotiate a better deal.
So you had a lot of immigration, as you were saying. Then where's your immigration coming in for the jobs? Where are they coming from again?
So we get people from all around the world, but predominantly South Africa, Australia, the UK for periods of time. But India, Pakistan, Sudan, Egypt would have been the big providers of junior doctors or residents in the country for a long time. Now we're actually getting a flow of people who are in their late 40s, early 50s from the UK, because they get to a very odd point there where if they get another promotion, they get current tax on future pensions, which means a 2,000 pay rise can be a 20,000 extra tax bill in a current year. And they said, not doing that. They're close to the top of their pensions. They can come over here. They can start again on a pension system on a better salary and end up with a second pension.
So, hey, going back, since I got you there last summer, I'm going to extrapolate that you're not having the kind of heat problems they're seeing in Italy and Spain.
Well, we were, and the farmers were concerned because there was an issue with the amount of growth, grass, grain, that kind of stuff was a problem. But now we've had 2.5 weeks of almost intense rain. We've had floods, we've had cars washed away, we've had hospital floodings. It's been incredible, the amount of rain. So we've gone from two extremes.
Yeah. Wait, if you were to use your latitude, I'm trying to remember where you
52.
are. Huh?
52 north.
Yeah. Where is that relative, say, to Boston?
We are probably just about the same as Boston.
That's what I was thinking. And the reason I was bringing that up is because sort of a little bit westward of Boston and north in Vermont, et cetera, and you're familiar with it, they're having extreme flooding, which they've never had before in some of the areas and around New York City as well. So that's interesting. Now, remember last year you had that, you had some flooding last year as well. You had some good weather and then extra hot weather, and then you got erosion of the roadways and all that. We talked about that.
Yeah, I didn't share. There were a couple of videos recently which were very interesting. We had these hailstorms, and we really don't get much hail around the year, but these were golf balls destroying cars.
Okay.
Huge, and that's completely unusual for here.
Yeah. Okay.
That was in June.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. That's just really wow. That's like, and so now, what's the impact and how are things going? Are you seeing ramping issues still, or what's happening with that?
Well, I'm in a very privileged position at the moment that we don't get any ambulances.
Huh? Why is that?
Because of the fire. We still have not been rebuilt fully, and the Department of Health has decided we are reopening come hell or high water next Tuesday, the 25th. Even though we are still,
I like your terminology there, right? With the flood. Okay.
Even though we will still be 40 beds down on what the hospital capacity is now. At the best times, the hospital capacity is 200. So we will be opening with 150 beds for a department that sees 1,000 people a week. We're closed at the moment, so that means we're only seeing 700 a week while we're closed.
Wow.
The rest being the ambulances. So we're seeing everything except ambulances.
So, okay, that's your place down in Wexford. What about the rest of the country? What's it looking like?
Yeah, it's getting pretty bad because of the diversions with our inactivity from an ambulance perspective. So people have to travel an hour in multiple directions, which means the ambulances then end up being locked
Right.
outside of their normal jurisdiction. When they get released, then they become a yellow dot on a screen, which is live, and suddenly they get retasked elsewhere. So it's very hard to repatriate those ambulances into the geographical area. Across the country, it's pretty bad all over.
Yeah, and that reminded me of our conversation last year where we were trying to decide what the disposition would be for our patients if our specific patients, if you know, you had to make a judgment call, should we wait for an ambulance or just drive them, you know, that kind of thing. So that's
I would say most of the time you should just drive.
yeah. So
I
that's
mean, if you don't have to wait. I mean, if you take a snapshot, if you were able to take a drone above most emergency departments, there'd probably be 7 or 8 ambulances outside. But
yeah.
like multiply that by 30, 35 departments, that's a lot of resources just stuck going nowhere.
And how about, well, of course, most of the people sit in, you know, most of the people live, I should say, and are in Dublin. What's that been like? Has that been any different than the outskirts?
So yes, and for a very specific reason. So school holidays, people having holidays from work, and they tend to all drive down the coast. And so Wexford is like the Cape Cod of Massachusetts. So our population goes from 100,000 to 450,000 during the summertime, with all that population down there, to a hospital that's now closed or supposedly closed.
All right. Well, anything else to report? I'm going to go back to Fiona and just hear about UK in general, but anything else to report from your end?
No, and that's pretty quiet.
All right, got it. And Fiona, anything else you can talk about, or do you want to go ahead and, now that I gave you a chance to read her email, do you want to talk us a little bit about Allison, who's been on, and remind everybody what she covers?
So Alison is the medical director for West Midlands Ambulance Service. She is also the chair of the Joint Royal College's Ambulance Liaison Committee, which is the group that signs off the national guidelines for paramedics and all ambulance staff. And on the 12th of May, she suffered a massive subarachnoid hemorrhage. She was out in Leeds, which is near where she lives, and she started feeling very unwell and collapsed. And she was taken very rapidly to Leeds General Infirmary, LGI, which is a major trauma centre, a neurosurgical centre. And she was diagnosed as having a subarach and had 3 coils put in that night. She was admitted to ITU, and the outlook was not very good. But the next day she was very much better. However, over the next week, she suffered problems with increased pressure and hydrocephalus, and she had to have an EVD put in. That fell out. It got resited. But she had quite significant left-sided weakness. Since then, with aggressive physiotherapy, rehabilitation, and Alison being the character that she is, she has made a phenomenal recovery. Yeah. And she was discharged home at the weekend. And I've got a picture of her standing. She's moved house through all of this because her partner's got some very big motorbikes and cars. So they weren't going to be housed in her previous house. So not only has she been an inpatient for some weeks on ITU and HDU, but she's now gone to a new house and is doing really well. So, and I'm sure that she would be absolutely delighted to know how much people from across the globe have been thinking about her.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want, make sure then you get that message back that we talked about her and miss her and all that, and hope she gets back on, especially because hopefully she'll be available to get on a little bit more. Then we'd love to have her there. One thing that she said that was striking was that she was only 2 minutes away from a neurosurgical center, and that actually the consultant in the resuscitation bay was one of her trainees, I think, if I remember correctly, right? So, yeah. Boy, it just was like, in quoting her, life is so fragile. So it makes you appreciate every day. But I'm glad she's done a great. She still has some, I think, weakness in one leg, but but things are improving steadily. Not steadily, but slowly, I guess, in a way. So far, and that was back about 2 months ago, if I remember correctly, right?
12th of May. So May, June, July. Yeah. So yeah, just over 2 months.
Right. Okay. Got
2.5 months.
All right, well, let me go. Well, thanks a lot. Anything else you want to mention, or else I'm going to go around the room and sort of, I want to do a couple of things. We have some presentations to be done as well, so if we can. All
So
right.
that's it for me. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, no, thanks. And it's great seeing you as well. Hey, Mike, how are you doing on time? Because usually this is bad for you, Mike Levy. How are you doing?
Yeah, it is. It's great to see everybody, but it's bad timing. I had one meeting cancel, the one that always interferes with this, and I have another one coming up in 10 minutes. So I'm just sit here, listen to people and get to see everybody. Thanks.
Okay, but anything to report out of Alaska anyways, let alone Anchorage?
Rain.
Okay, rain. Okay, good.
Thanks.
But how's the temperatures for there? Anything you're seeing up there? Like vis-a-vis Canada, right?
Yeah, it's a big state. You know, in the South Central, we're seeing 50s and 60s. I mean, it's pretty much just a usual wet summer for us. It's been warm and sunny down in the Southeast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that tracks. But
Just as a fair warning, I want you to know that my son's coming into your state on a cruise next week. Okay, so I just want to make sure you're warned.
if he gets this far up, and few do, I'd be happy to help in any way if he needs any direction.
Okay, I will. Well, it's good to have a backup in case there was a medical thing, but usually they do so on those ships, but it's still
I
good.
was thinking about a restaurant recommendation more than that.
Yeah, that's good point. We'll see. I don't even know where they're going, but I think I remember Sitka being named. So, but
Most time it's Southeast, and cruises don't usually go directly up here, but they go to Whittier, Seward. So that's how people get here that way.
yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, best to the my best out to the peninsula, by the way, just because I just have my own fond memories from being up here. So, all right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Let's see. Let's go out to Chris real quickly in Orlando, because we hadn't talked to you for a while, Chris. We're glad you can join us. And by the way, so Mike, are you better off if we went back to the morning time? Because I don't want to lose you. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely better off. I'm honestly up at 4 a.m. every day, and so
Okay.
earlier the better for me. It works great, and it lets me work off the East Coast folks getting started a little bit later in the day. So if that ever happens, that's more convenient. Thanks.
All right. Well, we may do that because I'm just saying, we got we got different people on, but sometimes it's relatively. But I want to ask you guys, because you're the ones that are always on all the time, and so the people that are on today, I'd love to get feedback from you if you're better off, earlier in the day, etc. So let's go, and Chris, let's go ahead and talk to you, just because I wanted to catch up with you, Chris Super. And then, if you don't mind, I'll before we go there, Almo, are you okay time wise? Can you do it like say around 4:15 or something like that, or is that too late for you? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I've got until at least 4:15 or so East Coast. So another half hour.
Yeah, well, I better maybe put you half an hour. I better put you earlier than that. So, okay, good. But let's just first go to Chris Suver. Go ahead, Chris. Anything new to report out of the Orlando and Orange County area? How's things evolving there?
Oh, it's going. We're hopeful here in a very short while we'll have our whole blood program running. We're going to start in the county and then kind of expand from there. Our other major hospital partner still has agreed in verbal to play along with the Resus Center process. So that means both Advent and Orlando Health would both be willing to progress. Advent's been kind of held back because they have a new CMO who wants to start all over on the paperwork and the credentialing. So we're going to do it in the round.
Is that like, is Jeff Kuhlman now doing it, or is it different? You're talking different position?
No, Jeff's still there. They just hired. The person who was in charge of all the medical side retired, and they kind of just put everything on brakes while they recruited for a new person. It was bad timing.
God, but you think it's going to go in the right direction then, right?
I do, and if they slow down, I think the fact that their main competition is going to do it will, or has agreed to do it, will hopefully speed things along too. Healthy competition is always good.
Yeah, and then I think though first of all, just the fact that you guys are doing that in concert is just a great model, and it's just really looking forward to not only you getting this done, but working out all the kinks and telling us how to do that later, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's right. Well, good. Anything else to report from you and all that? You're doing well, and your family? How's your kids doing? Okay.
They're doing well. 2 of the 3 are about to well, one's going back to college. The other one's going to be heading up for the first time. So we're a little crazy right now, getting ready.
Yeah, that's an interesting time of life, that's for sure. Okay, well, good. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I'll try to figure out some good excuse to come up and see you then. Okay. Well,
Sounds good, Paul.
all right. Hey, who's area code 508? I see a 508 there. Who is that? Just so I know. Who's 508? Okay, well, whatever. And then Terry, just so you know, your mic's open. Terry Valenzuela. Okay, Amal, we'll let you take it away. We'll go ahead and jump right over to Amal, and then we'll move along since he only has a little bit of time left. But you wanted to present a case that has nothing to do with cardiology today, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, believe it or not. So
No,
there-
I'm glad. I always wanted you to do. I always said don't have to always do heart stuff. You know, you can do anything because you're just a great teacher, and I want you to be able to, to tell us a lot of different areas, make us, with your prescient knowledge, as I said in the what do you call it thing here. And by the way, our CAB for today is what was it? 17393, 17393. And for those that were on the Seagulls before, that was 17392, 17392. Okay, take it away, Professor. Okay.
Yeah, I can talk about things that scare me aside from the heart. And this was a research letter that was actually published in Academic Emergency Medicine recently. And I'm sure every one of you working in emergency medicine has seen a case like this before, but it reminded me of a recent case that we had. This a 55 or 60-year-old guy who had come to the emergency department. He had persistent nausea and vomiting at home. He thought maybe he ate something bad. He called 911 as he was starting to feel lightheaded and dizzy and woozy, and he looked kind of dehydrated. So MS brought him for vomiting and dehydration, and he looked pretty good. And so, like most of our patients, he went out to the waiting room and sat out there for hours and hours and hours. And then finally, about 6 or 8 hours later, he got brought back in when a room finally opened up, and he got a full, thorough evaluation. And guess what the diagnosis was? I'm sure you all know. Posterior stroke. So you lost 6 hours. And this is a really common miss and a source of litigation for a lot of emergency physicians. I'm on our campus-wide risk management committee that oversees 14 hospitals, and I would say probably at least every year, if not every 2 years, there's a case of a patient who came in with dizziness and turned out to have a posterior stroke. And I didn't realize this, but emergency physicians are the most likely specialists named in malpractice for missed stroke cases, even more often than neurologists. And the problem is that dizziness, as you all know, is neither sensitive nor specific for anything, and people use the word dizziness for a lot of things. And
right.
In this article, they talked about the fact that 15% of dizzy patients have a more serious medical problem, and 10% of strokes are missed on the first presentation. And posterior strokes are the most common type of missed stroke, and especially when they come in with dizziness.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, people don't come in saying that they're having a posterior stroke. They use the words like dizzy or lightheaded. Or when I was in Philadelphia in training, people always used to say that I'm woozy and dazzled. I used to like that, woozy and dazzled, or simply unexplained nausea and vomiting, or unsteadiness or vertigo. So just real briefly about this paper, it was a small study that came out of Mayo in Arizona. And what they did was they looked at 69 malpractice cases involving dizziness, or dizzy patients that had strokes. And amongst the symptoms that they presented with, 54% presented with a headache, which is surprising to me and has always been, because back in my training, I was taught that strokes give you negative symptoms, not positive. And so if you're having a headache, it's not a stroke. Strokes give you absence of symptoms, and that's completely false. 41% of these patients had nausea and vomiting. So the other pearl is anybody with nausea or vomiting, you at least consider the possibility of a posterior stroke. In this study, amongst these 69 patients, 17% died, which is really high when you look at the mortality rate from ischemic strokes. So these are very high morbidity, high mortality type of strokes, because the posterior fossa is so enclosed. So when these patients have missed stroke, they develop edema and do very poorly. 54% of these malpractice cases were resolved with no finding of negligence, which, if my math is correct, 46% were payouts, which is an awful lot. And interestingly, when negligence was found, the average award payment was $17 million. If a case was settled before a negligence was discovered, the average payout was 1.2 million. So my take home point there is if I ever get sued for this, I'm going to settle for sure. So anyway, just skipping to the chase here, take home points from this article. We've got to consider stroke in any patient with nausea and vomiting. I think that's a really important take home pearl. Beware dizziness or other similar words. It's always a stroke until proven otherwise. Most common misdiagnoses are migraine, BPV, and anxiety is really common also. Don't underestimate the risk of stroke in young patients. In this study, the average age was 45 years old amongst these missed posterior circulation. And also, don't underestimate the risk of stroke in patients with a headache. They don't have to be hemorrhagic strokes. Ischemic strokes produce headaches quite often as well. In this study, 54% had headaches. They were ischemic posterior circulation strokes. And most of these patients will have dizziness plus one other neurologic symptom. So it's kind of like the dissection. People refer to dissection as the chest pain plus condition, chest pain plus neurosymptoms, chest pain plus back pain, chest pain plus leg pain. And similarly with these posterior circulation strokes, somebody who has dizziness plus something else, I think you really have to worry a lot about posterior circulation stroke. I'm not going to go into the whole workup, the HINTS exam and everything else, but I think it was an interesting study just to point out how often we miss these and how easy it is to miss these and some of the myths that are out there. So I really enjoyed reading that, and it was one of those things that definitely scared me.
Yeah. And then the other thing where people have missed this is that they see someone who they think is drunk, or the paramedics have thought that they were drunk. And, because they were, had lost their balance, et cetera. It was because, if it's hit the archicerebellum, then they're really, they don't have postural control, that kind of thing. And they think they're just drunk and they've been seen as that. So it goes beyond dizzy. And the other thing, when people tell me they're dizzy, the first thing I do say, is it like the room spinning dizzy, or is it just lack of balance dizzy and all that? And those are kind of things that are give you a quick differential. But I think this is fantastic that you brought this up, because it's a good reminder that to take not take it lightly when we have people who are dizzy and dazzled, as you said.
Woozy and dazzled.
Yeah, what was that? I get the woozy. What's the dazzled part? That's what I wanted to know.
I don't know.
It's kind of funny. So was that just a Philadelphia thing, you think?
I guess so. So a lot of interesting terms in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, anybody have any questions for him or any comments about this or anything else to say?
Yeah. Hey, Paul, it's Mark Cottrell. I'm the 508. I had trouble unmuting because of that whole star 6 thing.
Oh, hey,
but
Mark,
I
figure it was you, Mark. How are you? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, very well, very well. We're suffering from that scorching heat wave in San Francisco too. It got up to 75 yesterday, but we kind of made it through. I was feeling a little dizzy, but I just hydrated and sat down.
The only question I have is, were you dazzled as well? That's all I want to know.
I live in San Francisco. I'm always dazzled.
All right, go ahead.
To look around.
All right, Mark, go ahead.
But no, in all seriousness, no, I completely agree with Amal's take on this. And it's one of those things that I've gotten, I've near missed enough that I don't allow a paramedic, medical student, or resident to even proceed. If the word dizziness comes out of their mouth, I stop them there and I make them, go back and, as you do, is this vertigo or is this lightheadedness? It's two different systems, and just especially as we start to get older, and it doesn't have to be that much older, my threshold for, doing the stroke workup, which really is an MRI for the posterior circulation.
Yeah.
CT scan isn't that good. But it's one of those things, pet peeves. I do not like the word dizziness used in a medical context.
Yeah. And I think it's important to hear what Amal said, was that these guys can get edema, and so that you do get headaches and all that. And and it shouldn't be, it's just, usually people have not equated strokes with headaches. So, but that's where you get it back there. So,
Paul?
yes.
Paul?
Yeah, Terry, go ahead.
This is Terry. Yeah. How many MRIs do you think you have to do to find a posterior stroke? I mean, these consider this, consider that is so wide that I think we're going to drive the radiology guys nuts.
I don't think the point here so much is to get an MRI on everybody who's dizzy. I think it's to be thinking better about it and do a better differential and a better workup, in terms of physical
Yeah, I
exam.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key, Paul, is getting that physical exam, because I have not met a person with a posterior stroke who had a completely normal neurologic exam.
I won't do it today, but I have this 30, what I call it my 40-second neuro screening exam, and it just has picked up a lot of stuff like that. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Peter, I'll go to you. You have your hand raised very politely.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Amal. Appreciate it. The comment I had is that it was interesting when you started talking about this case. I thought for sure you were talking about a recent abstract that just popped into my feed. But when you just sent the link, I looked at it. But the one that I saw, and for some reason, there's a lot of articles now on lawsuits with stroke. The one that I saw was published in this month in the Neuro Hospitalist, which I'd never heard of. And they looked at, the title was Malpractice Lawsuits Relating to Mechanical Thrombectomy for AIS. And interestingly, of the 25 cases, 16 of them alleged failure to treat with mechanical thrombectomy, 8 for harm due to delay in treatment, and 1 case that had alleged complications. But my overall question based on that and based on this conversation is, how is this going to impact, or how will this impact the EMS agency's decision on where they transport stroke? And as many people know, since 2015 in Broward County and in Palm Beach, we decided to just bypass the primary stroke centers altogether. Now that the lawyers have wind of this, are we going to be embroiled in lawsuits if and when we take that dizzy patient with other symptoms to a place that doesn't do the thing that this patient needs to do, and therefore delays treatment? And I'm just curious as what your thoughts are as to the EMS's role in this litigation.
Yeah, Peter, when you say, are we going to be embroiled in lawsuits, are you talking about the EMS community, or are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about, in other words, my EMS system takes a patient who has signs that someone can say belong to, that should have gone to a comprehensive stroke center, but we didn't do that. Let's just say as a what if. They went to a primary, it delayed care by 12 hours, patient had a bad outcome. Could the EMS system be tagged as the root cause of the patient's outcome based on the initial transport destination decision? That's really my question.
I'm definitely not an expert on med mal for EMS systems. And so I don't know what type of risk the EMS community is at. And as you know, the malpractice is always based on standard of care. So what would be considered reasonable care? And I think it's definitely a lower bar for pre-hospital folks working in tough conditions who don't have the same time or equipment as we do in the emergency department in our cocoon to do a really good exam. So my assumption has always been that EMS folks are at lower risk. The risk really largely falls on the community hospital emergency docs who are not quickly transferring these patients with possible strokes to a tertiary care center or delivering appropriate care. So I don't know if other folks do med mal specifically for EMS community. Most of what I do is for emergency docs. So I don't know. I
think you gave it an appropriate answer, but what Peter should be driving at, I think, is that do we need to be doing a better job of training them how to identify or help screen what could be posterior versus whatever, that's it. But what he's getting at is that is the whole issue that we could be at risk. Someone will sue us for not going there since we are setting up a better standard of care in general for everybody. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah. That's exactly right. And whether or not that standard will be translated into the EMS community, because we have protocols now that say, like, for example, we have and Fiona was talking about the subarachnoid earlier. Our protocol says now, if a patient is having the worst headache of their life and you think they're having XYZ and you think it's an SAH, then you should go to the comprehensive center. And I worry that we have a patient who fits that criteria, they go to the wrong center, patient has a bad outcome, and then they look and say, paramedic, you did the wrong thing, which I think is possible.
Yeah, so the bottom line is that the purpose of this meeting is to bring out things like this, okay? And then for us to be aware of it and do better training, et cetera, as needed under these circumstances. And so we could dress down on this a little bit more later on. But I got a lot of people with their hands up, so I want to start taking some of those questions. I better do it in order if you don't mind. Hey, too bad we couldn't write a common errors in pre-hospital care book or something like that sometime, right? So I'm coming to bed soon in a second. Let's go with Mick first. Mick.
Yeah, just a quick question. If I got it right, Amal, you said there was a 70 million payout in one of these.
17.
17, not 70.
Yeah, it was only 17.
It's only 17. Yeah.
But it kind of leads into the next part then. So would the mathematics guys in the hospitals not get involved and go, well, look, 17 million could have bought us, I don't know what, 1,000 MRI scans or more. Is it not worth lowering the bar and doing more MRI scans on the basis of what the payouts are? Or is there ever any root cause going back on these things?
Well, I would answer by saying a couple of things, and I'd welcome other comment. Number one, I would never want to encourage additional testing. What I would encourage is, number one, increased awareness of the possibility, right, and better screening. And in fact, there are studies specifically for posterior circulation stroke, which have shown that on an initial evaluation, a HINTS exam is more accurate than the day one MRI. And so physical exam is going to save a lot more than just doing MRIs on everybody. Secondly, the malpractice is based on standard of care. And I think most of the time, these standard of care issues are not that somebody suspected it but didn't get the MRI. Most of the time, it's that you simply didn't suspect it in the first place. And that was because of an inadequate history and physical exam. Nobody asked about anything more than nausea, vomiting. They said, nausea, vomiting, you're probably just dehydrated. You probably just ate the wrong thing and didn't ask the additional questions. They didn't do the proper exam. And then even if it's a posterior circulation TIA, for example, they may come in asymptomatic, and an hour ago is when they had their TIA, and a day from now, they're going to have the full stroke and have the terrible outcome. What tips you off to the posterior circulation TIA? Well, it's the D's, the dysarthria, dysphagia, diplopia, disequilibrium. Those are the symptoms that people get. If somebody's having posterior circulation, they're either going to have an abnormal cerebellar history or an abnormal midbrain history. How do you rule out cerebellar problems? Were you off balance? Were you clumsy with your hands? And then how do you rule out midbrain issues, dysarthria, dysphagia, diplopia, disequilibrium? If somebody has none of the D's and they were never ataxic, to me, that very, very, very strongly rules out posterior circulation TIA. And I make sure that that's documented. And to me, that would meet a standard of care, even if it was a rare miss.
All right, let's just jump. I want to make sure I got to get Jim on here pretty soon. So, and I apologize, Jim, but let's go ahead to Ben Launer across town there, and then we'll go up to Dick Simpson.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, great discussion, obviously. I just wanted to make a plea for this diagnostic imperative. And I think that Amal had said it. It's very difficult in EMS, and at least in my system where we have 1,800 providers and very poor span of control, the over triage is hovering at about 30%. So a lot of our efforts are focused on, as Amal had mentioned, considering the diagnosis. And I believe Mark mentioned this as well, meaning that I think sometimes to just divert people because we want to take all strokes is kind of a very difficult logic to swallow. I think we really need to focus on identifying it early at dispatch and also figuring out how to tease this out, because I think in my experience and the literature shows there's still so much difficulty in identifying LVO, especially in systems with various degrees of composition. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, at least I've seen, before it even gets to the part about bypassing primary versus tertiary, which by the way, we do here in Maryland. So great discussion as always.
So we're going to go to Rob Holman in a couple of minutes because that's exactly what he was saying as well, just south of you, right? And but let's jump over to Nick. Can we get you back from Minneapolis?
Yeah.
What's up
Sorry
with
about
you?
that. Dog is
Yeah.
barking. Yeah, no, I'm curious if people generally have gone to the BFAST sort of stroke screen instead of the old Cincinnati. I know that's a thing that our stroke, centers here push for that initial screen, separate from the LVO screen. That said, even with that, including balance and eyes as part of it, you still have to think about it. So it's certainly not the catch-all. It hopefully catches more.
So Peter, it's not necessarily we were focusing here on posterior strokes, but the biggest things you've heard from your guys on LVOs have been the cortical signs, correct?
That's
Yeah,
correct. Yeah, that's just based on our early data. And so we modified our race scale so that we have a race plus if any cortical signs are present, and that's an automatic activation from the field of the cath lab.
So when I say cortical signs, what are some of those cortical signs, Peter?
Basically, you have gaze deviation, is really the one that we're seeing the most, I would say, Paul.
Okay.
And, yeah.
All right, good. And then, but again, that's in general in response to Nick's comments. But again, the posterior stroke is a whole different can of worms to some extent for a lot of reasons. And so I want to make sure we kept those in perspective. Let's jump down, if you don't mind. Let's, by the way, Nick, everything else going okay? And anything to report out of Minneapolis while I got you on?
Yeah, things are going well. Summer's cooking along. We got some smoke from the wildfires, and probably the biggest thing here is we just about a month ago launched our pre-hospital Suboxone program, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah.
Taking notes from Miramontes and folks in San Antonio, as well as many others around the country. So we're about 18 patients in so far, and that's going great.
All right, fantastic, Dan. It's great to see you. I'm hoping to be up there pretty soon again. All right. So take care, and best to your family as well. Because really appreciate you always being so great to me. All right, so Rob Holman, why don't we go ahead and jump over to you, and then we'll get over to Jim Augustine. Rob, you want to make any comments about here, because you were saying the same thing about the over triage issue.
Yeah, we are very blessed in this city of 62.5 square miles to have 3 comprehensive centers. We have what I consider to be a pretty significant stroke volume every year, more than 1,000 or so. And they don't want extra volume. So that's where we are. And, we're trying to follow our performance of screening for LVOs, getting them to the comprehensives, alerts, and all that. And it's we got a lot of work to do, but we're better than we were. But the news from us is our call volume, which has been high for the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, no surprises there. And as of yesterday, we now have a new assistant medical director whom I can introduce with a drum roll if you'd like, Paul.
Okay, sure. Go ahead and hit the drum roll.
Okay. Here it is. Okay, Dr. David Bitburg, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you. So it's an honor and privilege to be on the Eagles agenda. I didn't think that would happen on my second day on the job, and introduce myself to all of you and reintroduce myself to a lot of you that have educated me, Dr. Matu, my program director, Ben Lawner, who I trained alongside, and a lot of you who taught me at my EMS board prep course back in 2017. So I'm thrilled to be here. Trained at Upstate Medical University in Syracuse, did the combined EMI program at the University of Maryland, and then post-residency did a critical care fellowship at the NIH in Bethesda, and boarded in critical care, emergency medicine, and EMS. And for the EMS side of my professional life, just left 12 years as deputy medical director in Baltimore County, serving on the GO team through shock trauma at the University of Maryland, and program director of the paramedic program at the Community College of Baltimore County. From the hospital side of things, finishing my 10th year as division chief of critical care medicine at Greater Baltimore Medical Center. And when I heard about the job opening up as the assistant medical director in DC, I was thrilled, because as I was moving into my 10th year, in the ICU, primarily doing a little sprinkling of ED and a lot of EMS in the spaces in between. I was thinking a lot about where I wanted my legacy to be and what my passions are. And it's an incredibly rare opportunity to be able to practice EMS full time in the nation's capital. And so I'm thrilled to be here. I look forward to speaking with all of you and collaborating with all of you and working with Dr. Holman and the group at DC Fire EMS. So thank you for having me.
Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Really great to hear like your background a lot. It looks pretty similar to my own. So I'm looking forward to getting together and working with you. Speaking of which, do we need to bring him to Philomena? What do you think, Rob? Yes. Oh, you're on mute, I think. Is that part of the initiation?
Yeah, that is affirmative. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Well, maybe this Saturday coming up, we'll talk later. Okay. How's that?
Okay, sure.
Keep that in mind. All right. So
I was just questioning if he has enough certifications to be a medical director.
Yeah.
Only 4 boards, Paul.
I just remember at the NIH when you were triple boarded, they usually kept you away from patients, but I'll try and reserve judgment.
Well, we have a lot of boarding going on in our hospital, so you got to keep up nowadays, right? So anyways, congratulations for coming aboard, and look forward to working with you and hope you all enjoy hanging with us. So we're just a kind of a rat pack of sorts, but we get along pretty well. So hopefully you'll fall in with that as well. So, okay, so
Thank
good. Do you have any comments, or you want to pipe in on any of the discussions we've had today so far?
No, I was just thinking, in Maryland, we have designations of primary and comprehensive stroke centers, and I was thinking about the fact that the state designates these hospitals as such, and so the notion of bypassing primary stroke centers, I get it. I work at a primary stroke center, and I know how hard it is to transfer patients to comprehensive stroke centers when we really need it. But I wonder too about the state's responsibility in situations where the state affixes these labels.
Yeah. You're talking about in terms of going back to the liability issues and malpractice and whatever else. Is that you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Well, yeah, there's all that. That's, something, but they tend to have some kind of immunity. And that's what actually somewhat protective of us to some extent as well. But then that becomes a problem for folks like, David Miramontes and I, where we're being used to running our own shows, that kind of thing. And, and so, yeah, so there's always pros and cons. We talked about that last week with, Stein Bronsky and their approach to the delivering whole blood in Colorado. And there's always those pros and cons, but we will see. All right, so let's, Peter says the beauty of a delegated practice state. Okay, got it. Hey, so let me do this. Let's jump over. Do we have any former medical directors from Washington, D.C. here with us today? How about you, Jim? So
it's funny that there's 3 of them here: Rob Holman and Dave Miramontes, and the old guy is Jim Augustine.
Yeah, exactly right. It's really kind of cool. Well, it's great to have you all there. So anyways, good luck with it. And all right, so Jim, go ahead. And you want to give us a quick report on I don't know if all of you saw it, but I put it in today's email that there was a report that was put out in EMS, and it was an ACEP Now, correct, Jim, from this month. Jim gave a report about this past year, and why don't you go ahead and tell us about this, what you call, I think, what was it, the year of survival? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the year of survival, which is how all of us in the emergency department feel, and then the ripple effects go in EMS. So I gave a little bit of this at Eagles, but 160 million patients were seen in EDs before the pandemic, and we're about back to that now in 2023. That means it's 6 years until the next billion patients are seen in the U.S. emergency departments. We will see, of course, all of the high priority diseases. So trauma and strokes and STEMIs and ruptured aneurysms and other high acuity. In 2022, about 20% of patients arrived in emergency departments in an ambulance. And of that, 35% were admitted. that's significantly higher than the admission rate for walk-in patients. But what happened in 22 that was the talk of survival is the rest of the hospital quit supporting emergency departments about midway through 21. And in 22, we began to see a rapid increase in boarding times of inpatients in the ED, which then increased very significantly in 22, which then clogged the beds, took up our nurses and techs, and left us in a position to not be able to see people effectively that were presenting for their routine emergency department needs. All that conspired really to give us very long processing times for emergency department patients. And when processing times go up, when processing times go up, walk-away rates go up very significantly. And the biggest disappointment of 2022 was almost 5% of ED patients walked away before their service was complete. 5% of 160 million is about 8 million patients. And that doesn't reflect another very large number of patients who are very unhappy with wait times or with service availability, and the doctors and PAs, nurse practitioners, scrambling around trying to serve their needs while there's no nurses and techs available. So all of these parameters that we have watched in the emergency department have fallen apart, and we all know that that results in wall times and dissatisfaction amongst EMS. It's also backed up into our transfers that occur. And a big discussion in ACEP this week was about having to put people in private cars to send them between emergency departments because EMS vehicles are not available, or the timeliness of being able to transport is not available. So we're sending people from hospital to hospital or freestanding ED to mothership by way of private vehicles. So we have a major enemy, which is poor hospital operations, resulting in boarding in the ED, resulting in significant operational issues for the ED. And Paul, that's the crux of the issue as we move through 2023.
So what's your prediction? Going to get worse?
Well, right now, many of our hospitals are looking at solutions, but have a convenient way of saying, we have hospital needs all over the place for nurses and techs, and you guys always manage to muddle through. The ED always manages to muddle through, which is a stunning coast to coast kind of statement that is made. And it's better to leave the mess in the emergency department is frequent. You guys will make things happen, and there's no body count associated with this at this point. Although our malpractice risks are going up very significantly. So something's going to break. At the same time, the payers tell us that any bill that arrives from an emergency department and emergency physician is a surprise bill, so they're not paying it. So we've quickly gone from an efficiently run emergency department where the hospitals were willing to help us to where we can't get paid and we can't get patients moving through the ED. So that's where we are right now, and it's probably going to get a little worse before it gets better.
Okay. Anybody have any comments?
Hey, Jim, can I? Yeah, it's Mark. We're having this issue, and I kind of very recently did an attitude adjustment on myself where, I was always really stressed out by having 40 or 50 patients in the waiting room with long waits. But I finally figured out that it really comes down to a triage issue. The vast majority of those patients are not sick. A huge number of those patients are basically in the emergency department because they can't get a primary care appointment. And I finally figured out that it's not getting better. The burnout rate among emergency physicians is getting worse. We're our own worst enemy when it comes to that. And I've started teaching my residents on shift that our job is to identify the sick ones, take care of them, identify the sick ones that don't look sick, which is harder, but find them, find the high-risk ones like Amo's case, and take care of them and not rush through it, because that's how we take a guy who has nausea and vomiting and give him a dose of Zofran and make sure he can sip water and then send him home without actually doing a complete neurologic exam, which takes time. So increasingly, I'm becoming of the attitude, I'm coming in for an 8-hour shift. I'm going to see X number of patients during that shift. The waiting room will have 50 patients when I arrive, and they have 60 when I leave. But my job isn't to see them all. It's to pick out the sick ones and make sure they're the ones that get seen right away. And if there's dissatisfaction, well, then that becomes the hospital problem. And I'm not buying into that. And I'm not basically taking responsibility for not seeing a patient who has had back pain for 6 weeks and is frustrated by it, but can't get a primary care appointment. That's the end of my rant.
Yeah. Well, it's, and I hate to talk, well, here's what I did, but one of the things we did years ago when I was at Parkland, because we saw nearly 900 patients or more a day, one of the things we created was exactly what you're saying, is we worked in a triage approach, and we actually created a kind of a primary care clinic across the street. Whether we call it urgent care or whatever it may be, and we were able to send in, we were able to triage quite a bit of people out there, and that helped us a whole lot as well, and increased the satisfaction because we were at least seeing people. But it did take a commitment to create a better triage team up front. Usually we actually use, I was part of the team at one point, let alone nurse practitioners, etc. And we actually picked up on some bad diseases sometimes from people that didn't seem that they were that sick. And there was that positive end of it as well. But I mean, just that's the thing. I don't know. Is anybody else? What are the other things that other people are doing in their realms? Or not? I don't know what to say. But
yeah, Paul, one last thing I'll say is that APOD is not a volume issue. APOD is a triage issue. Patients who are sitting on the wall could either go to the waiting room or
yes,
sick enough not to be able to wait in the waiting room. And the patients who are in the waiting room are able to wait. So
yes.
I am not buying this APOD issue being a volume issue. It's just mistriage.
Okay, when you say APOD, make sure I understand what you're saying.
Ambulance patient offload delays.
Ambulance
Okay.
offload delays. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yep. Okay.
Mark, I wish it was, I wish I could feel comfortable after 40 years of doing this, of telling the next generation, be satisfied with poor service to patients, and that you can adequately triage, a waiting room full of 80-year-olds who are presenting there because they don't have access to primary care, and they count on us. And we worked for many years to establish an emergency care system that was responsive. We had patients die in the waiting room in the early 2000s. It became embarrassing. There were three cases that were near manslaughter charges against the triage staff. And we almost lost the entire ED nursing staff because they said, I'm not going to sit in triage and be subject to manslaughter charges from the local prosecutors. And we really, I've worked in a lot of big to little emergency departments where service orientation and responsiveness to patients was really important, and where we didn't have to have 40 and 50 people waiting and us hoping that bad case wouldn't be in the mix that day. So I certainly hope we can find ways to resolve this and turn over an emergency system that is prepared to manage things in a timely manner, prepared to manage 200 million patients a year with good service parameters, because that's what our community needs. And then wait for primary care of some kind to catch up and begin to manage the patients that can be managed in that system.
Sounds like it's not just our problems, listening to what Fiona said, it's the same issue over there as well, maybe even worse than us, quite frankly. So Peter, a comment on this?
Yeah, this in parallel, the conversation that I see going on more frequently is unionization of doctors. And partly it's to blame the private equity folks who are quote unquote destroying the healthcare system, and they're not enabling the ED groups to do the job that they have to do. So I'm curious, there are a number of groups now that are of ED docs who are unionizing, and I'm just curious to see if that's something that you all see as something that's going to move forward across the country, because it sure seems to me like it's gaining a lot of steam.
So I guess I could.
Stanford residents are unionizing now.
I think I could have planted that question there, Peter. since some of you probably saw the headline, is
Yep.
the physicians at the site where I work clinically
Mhm.
are unionized, created their own union. They had their election process through the National Labor Relations Board, and they were unanimous in their support. There was not a single one of the of the docs that were eligible to vote that voted against the union. The backstory on that is we were a local group for a long time, but we only had 2 owners with no one else having any equity. Those 2 owners sold out to Team Health during the time when many of these groups were in these bidding wars. It was a great time for them to sell out, really. They did very well. And then there's been, really discontent ever since then. Very, very poor fit. No one ever listened to the concerns, particularly of the core faculty, over and over and over, and no, going through any channels through Team Health and through the Ascension Health system got nowhere. And this was really a sign of frustration on the part of those physicians. I mean, they spent a lot of their own money on attorneys and everything else. They didn't join a pre-existing labor organization. They created their own union from scratch. So that was a pretty wild thing. The other thing I wanted to ask Jim said it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't want to sound like a negative, an uttering nabob of negativism here, but it seems like it's going to get worse before it gets worse. Jim, how do you see it getting better?
It's going to get worse before it's going to get worse. That's good. I'm going to remember that one. It's Yogi Berraism. Good job, Rob. No, but go ahead, just respond, Jim.
Yeah, in the community hospital systems, we have seen a change in our administrators who have said, we put the community in a bad position. We put our EMS responders in a bad position. We put our medical community in a bad position when they can't refer their patients in, and that's not acceptable. So as they begin to recruit back and focus on improvement in hospital operations, and some places we've already seen this very honestly, in Ohio in particular, we have community hospitals that who simply won't accept long wait times and walkaway rates, and they're focused on improving flow through the ED, and back to our old way of thinking that any walkaway patient is unacceptable. What can we do to prevent that? So I think in many communities we'll focus on getting back to where we should be, and I'm sorry what's happening around you is happening, Rob.
All right, Rob, anything else to report from Detroit while I have you on? Because I got to get Peter on and a couple other people on as well.
Yeah, just one quick thing on the EMS side. Things are actually have been getting steadily better. I presented about a private partnership that's worked out really good to cover some surge times in the summer. That's as good as ever. And actually, we had an excellent recruit class. I got 87 recruits starting the academy in 2 weeks. So,
oh, good. Fantastic then. All right, sounds good, and it's great to see you. I had so much fun with you. And did you ever, by the way, you and I had this conversation about the fellows, remember?
Yeah.
Are you following up on that, or
yes, yep, you bet.
Okay, you good. Okay, and you, maybe David would be really good too as well. All right, let's I do have a couple. Peter, you want to give us a quick report, and then Eileen, do you have time to give us a report on any ID stuff going on after I talk to Peter? Okay. So let's start with Peter. Peter, you put on a Florida Blood Coalition or something like that last week, right?
Yeah.
How did that go? All right.
I had this great speaker who talked about TXA and calcium. I forget his name.
Yeah,
I think Dr. Papa, or something like that.
Yeah, right.
No, it was really, really well received. And in fact, I received a number of emails, and some of them which I forwarded to the group of speakers. I got another email this morning about another agency who wants to come on board, and we had the folks from Colorado. But your talk on TXA was phenomenal, and the discussion on calcium, I think, keeps getting better and better. And I think it's just seeing what's going around the country, and the fact that we're all coming together and sharing best practices, I think is phenomenal. So thanks, Paul, for your what you did last week.
Well, I was gonna say though, the broader thing was that we are just seeing that people are starting to get this done. And yet, as we just heard, they're starting the programs up in different areas, et cetera. And it's exciting to hear that. One thing I did want to bring out though, is that what started off as an initiative to try to get funding for this at the federal level, ended up being, it's a more global thing that we're starting out there. You want to explain what that was? John Kramer, I was going to have him mention it here today, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, John is putting together a stakeholder group of folks who really are going to look at this from really a more global level, as you mentioned. And there's 4 pillars of what they're looking at, and I don't have them right offhand, but in general, it's, you know, reimbursement is a big one. How do we solve the reimbursement issue? And just as an example, you know, we had a case in Palm Beach County where we only billed $800. The blood cost us $1,000. The same guy goes and his hospital bill, he had a couple of weeks in the ICU, multiple surgeries, was $1 million. And so it's not really appropriate for EMS to be spending the money on the blood. It's not financially reasonable. The second thing is the scope of practice. And unlike Florida, many states don't allow paramedics to even give the blood. Right. So they have to overcome that. There's education that's involved and so forth. So John has really split it up into 4 pillars. He's asking people who are interested to actually join. And you know, Paul is going to be on that committee. They've asked me, which is nice of them to do, and really trying to get big stakeholder group to help on the federal level, even though it's not a federal thing. John's putting together a pretty nice stakeholder group that's going to really have a big impact.
And the other one of the issues is sourcing, for example, where you get the blood from, how does that work out? That's why the thing they're doing in Colorado might end up being a pretty cool thing. One thing, hey, David Miramanis, I'm glad to have you on board. We were bringing up the issues, and CJ and I were on the phone with the PharmD out of Lakeland, Florida the other day. We were talking about the formulations issue about calcium chloride versus gluconate and all that. I brought up the issue that maybe gluconate was a problem, that because you have to have it metabolized in the liver, and what if your liver's damaged or you're not perfusing well or whatever. But there are some really interesting studies that she brought up to us that in which calcium gluconate actually can give you a lot of ionized calcium, even if you have your liver taken out, you know, during transplant. So maybe it's not as big an issue. The biggest issue for calcium, though, for you has been actually a logistics issue, right, David Miramanis?
Yeah, it's logistics, because if you're trying to give TXA push and then Ang blood and give Herceptin because they got an open belly or whatever, or a chest, and then you have calcium on top of it, it's just too much. We want our medics to focus on marches. Stop the massive bleeding, push back or tourniquet, get an airway, open the chest, and then get the cluck to the truck and do the 3 things that you're supposed to do, which is give TXA first because you can push it, hang the blood, mix the antibiotics. When the blood's done, you can give that push and go from there. And just adding another layer of calcium in the field when we really don't know that it has any benefit, I'm not sure it's helpful. Now, granted, I have a district that transports 35 minutes. For them, that might be a good option. But I don't think if you're going to have a less than 30-minute total contact time, that pushing the boys to do and girls to do more in a shorter amount of time is the right answer if it's not going to have any bang for the buck. And let's face it, they're going to get to the trauma center and get 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 units in the massive transfusion protocol. So they can give the calcium then.
So I just want to make sure everybody heard his point of view. That doesn't mean David's against it, okay? Then David, if you were to give it in the field, do you have any preference about chloride because of the issues of sclerosing, or we heard about, you know, the amputations and things like that? Where are you?
I'm a gluconate fan, but the issue then is logistics again. So chloride burns, it screws up veins. It can cause nausea and vomiting if you give it too fast, all that kind of stuff. So gluconate is a better option for that. But logistics, right? Most of the time the gluconate comes in an ampule. So now we have to draw it from a glass ampule, which is a problem. It's more expensive. It's not in a preload. So it's all about logistics, I think. I'm not against giving calcium. I don't think it'll hurt anybody, but I don't think it'll help anybody either in the time that it takes when we have other competing priorities for care of the trauma patient.
So one more thing though, is that, something I started getting a lot smarter about myself, I was not that, tuned into it, is the hypocalcemia trauma itself, not just associated. I understand the blood thing where we're giving blood and we have EDTA and citrate in there. But the fact that people will actually come in hypocalcemic just from the trauma alone, and I've been trying to understand that. I don't think I've gotten a good answer. I've said it's like, when you give calcium to someone to drive down the potassium levels, et cetera. It may be the same thing here where it's just another ion competing, like hydrogen ion. In other words, because hemoglobin is a great buffer. If you're losing it, then you're losing some of that buffer. And secondly, you got all these, hydrogen ions coming out of lactic acidosis and all that. And that may be what's your understanding, David, of the mechanism of hypocalcemia trauma alone? Nope. Are you on the radio?
I don't have a real mechanistic effect of that. I don't, but I don't think that the value of that in the pre-hospital value is worth the bang for the buck.
Okay, got it. All right, good. So just there it is. That's why we said no one has any problem. Remember I said, which way do you go? It's like no one has a problem with it per se, if you get away with it, but it's just a matter of the issues, just like I brought up last week with logistics and so on. So that was kind of cool. All right. Anything else you would add to that, Peter, then? I thought I'd take advantage of that because that was one of the more interesting conversations we had was on that subject, right?
Yeah. I mean, did you see the email from Virginia where they say they gave the calcium quite early in the call, and it ended up giving the patient a little bit of ectopy, etc. And the question is whether or not it was given. I think it was given before the blood or what have you. But I think timing of when the calcium is given probably matters too.
Yeah, well, it sure does. But there, again, in that individual, there may be so many other factors going on.
Sure.
There. So then let's see. Hey, Lauren Marie, are you here? I hate to bother you, but you're on. Lauren's a R3 that wants to become an EMS fellow. And if I'm embarrassing you, Lauren, you don't have to say anything. But what was your takeaway from listening to that last week, for example? Did you have an opinion on the calcium? Or are you going to look into that further? I don't know if maybe I lost her here. She looks like she's on. All right, so we'll just go ahead and skip that. All right, so let's go ahead and see what we have. If we got anything from Dr. Smarty. Hey, Eileen, Marty, how are you? Anything going on in the world of ID or anything else you want to bring up epidemiologically speaking?
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things. First of all, as probably everybody became familiar with respiratory syncytial virus, who wasn't, because of the fact that RSV is a killer of small newborns and young children. And of course, there's a lot of hospitalizations, most of the RSV children are perfectly healthy before they get RSV and end up in the hospital. So the news that I bring to you isn't about that. It's rather the fact that the FDA has now approved a monoclonal antibody that blocks the fusion peptides of RSV. So if these young children show up in your ER, you should know that nirsevimab is now completely available to treat these kids. And I think that's good news in the infectious disease front. The other thing to mention,
hey, Peter, as a pediatrician, had you heard about that? Or I know you're not working there, DiMaggio, that much anymore, but is that something that's appeared on your screen that you knew about?
No, first I'm hearing. No.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you then. Go ahead, Eileen.
Sure, great. But now you know, Peter. So there, and I hope it's useful. The other thing that's sort of interesting in the infectious disease front is they've identified more than 40 cats in Eastern Europe that have the H5N1 bird flu. And I used to teach a class called 35 Reasons to Get Rid of Your Cat. Which
I know who you could give that talk to.
Because there's so many what are called alloneuroses, and those are diseases that are transmitted from cats to humans very, very effectively. One of my favorite ones, of course, is plague. The best way to get pneumonic plague is either from a human that has pneumonic plague or a cat. Because the molecular changes to the Yersinia pestis bacteria is the same in the cat lungs as it is in the human lungs. That makes it far more dangerous than if you get the same bacteria as bubonic plague. So when you think about those things about cats in general and how they transmit stuff, the fact that cats are getting bird flu is something to put that H5N1 back in our radar of things to think about. Next thing I want to mention is, of course, everybody's, and you mentioned it at the very beginning of this meeting, the climate issues, the heat and the drought and the so forth and back and forth. And as we talked about during the big meeting, this is a great way to increase vectored infectious diseases at these particular temperatures. So we do have to be on the lookout for those. And it's absolutely changing the risk from fungal pathogens, because as fungi adapt to the warmer weather, they become, it becomes easier for them to colonize us at higher rates, and therefore they become more infectious to humans than they've been in the past. And last but not least, something not infectious that I want to mention is, in case you hadn't seen it, there's even more data on how bad artificial sweeteners can be. And there's just, artificial sweeteners were touted as a way of losing weight, but in point of fact, you actually wind up with more problems with type 2 diabetes and an increased risk of weight gain because of how it changes your intestinal flora. And then the most recent data that came out was on NutraSweet and the risk of it being a carcinogen. So that's what I've got for you.
Okay, got it. And then I'm trying to remember the other name for the NutraSite, that it's in Diet Coke, it's in Coke Zero and all that. I'm mental blanking on the name of it. That particular thing that you're talking about, that's a possible carcinogen. I know that WHO said it probably could be, and then but then the FDA came back and said, yeah, but you'd have to have it in large amounts, but I don't know what large amounts is. So what I would have to,
well, I mean, the dose always makes the poison. We've talked about that a million times, right? The dose makes the poison, but way too many. I mean, yeah, and it's absolutely true. You get a little tiny bit, an occasional Diet Coke or whatever, whatever. That's not a big deal. But that's not the way many people consume these products, and that's very unfortunate.
Right.
My dad told me a long time ago, learn to drink it without the sugar, when he said, drink your coffee black.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly right. Well, he was probably right, but it was Cuban coffee, so that's what made it even better, right? So it's okay. So, all right. Well, thank you. It's great to see you. And so let's move on from here. Let's just do a quick round the room. Let's go to Kevin Mackey and Kevin, anything to report out of the registry and or Sacramento, and then hopefully I'll jump over to Glenn Asada in New York.
Hi, thanks, Paul. Nothing in particular. We're having a first. I will tell you this is really good news. We're having a first up here in Sacramento since I've been the medical director. We're actually doing a large scale review of an MCI we had up here. We had a mother with 11 unrestrained children in a vehicle strike a tree. 2 of the kids were in circulatory arrest when they arrived. The other 9 so far have survived. This happened about a month ago, and we're doing a full-scale wraparound review with police and fire. Because I think that the actions of a lot of these men and women with the fire service ended up saving those other 9 kids' lives.
Wow.
So I'll let you know how that goes. It's kind of amazing.
I had not heard about that at all. Usually I'm in tune with all that stuff, so I hadn't heard about it. It's wild. Yeah, give us a follow-up on it sometime, okay? That'd be.
I will, absolutely. Otherwise, everything's well. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, good. And you're saying that Eric had a good time with us, huh?
Yeah, he really had a great time, and I got to tell you guys that the traction that provided for us. He's had connections in several states. And we are developing protocols locally that will hopefully help others that want to implement this.
Oh, good. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
fantastic. All righty. So we did the same thing with something about in something like a hand Chevy or hinge something several years ago. Same kind of thing. That was kind of fun, right, Peter? Remember years ago, we had someone from Orlando present something about some hand thing that you had, right? That you were working on, right? So that was kind of
And the day I'll never forget, 2012.
ah.
Yeah, George Rawls. Yeah, thank you.
The day that
was-
will live in infant.
Correct, correct.
All right. Hey, so Glenn, what's happening in New York?
Yeah, our mayor continues to say that crime and shootings are down, and yet yesterday at 1:30 p.m., a 15-year-old was shot and killed in Brooklyn. Followed last night about 11 o'clock in Times Square in front of the gun-free zone, Red Lobster. 3 teenagers shot. They're alive at the moment. So
Tell me, wait, back up. I got to replay that. What's the gun-free zone? Tell me about that. What does that mean?
Right. So after the Supreme Court thing about guns and such, New York State passed the law and city said, we don't want people carrying guns. So they made these gun-free zones. Times Square is a gun-free zone. And yet, 3 people shot there. So
What can you say? I'm just shaking my head. That's all. All right. But otherwise you're doing well and everybody's doing okay. And Jackie's doing okay. And
yep, thank you. Yep.
All right. Is it baseball season, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, baseball season's over, and my son, who decided after 14 years of baseball, he's going to throw shot put and discus now in college over Tufts. So he just broke my heart, I'll tell you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, who knows? You never know. We'll see how it goes. So that's kind of cool that they're not too far away, right? So being up at Tufts, but still they're on their own now. So that's a tough one right there on its own as you go through that period. Okay, well, thanks. Let me run down to a couple people I wanted to talk to real quickly. Hey, David, anything else to report out of San Antonio, by the way, since I got John? Oh, Ben, I want to get to you. Sorry about that, Ben Weston. I've been mean. That's who I wanted to get to. But let's go with David first.
It's San Antonio. We're hot, hot, hot. We've deployed our temp bag. That's the thermal emergency management patient bag. That's a body bag you fill with ice. And we've done that 6 times in the last week. People are going from 104, 105, 106 degrees to 37 Celsius by the time they get to the hospital. So we just take a body bag, put the patient in it, throw the buckets of ice from the fire engines or the medical officers on top of them. We put the pads on them first. And then by the time we get to the hospital, we cut a corner, drain out the water, take them in the ER, and they're cooled off.
Use a different name, though, out there when you're doing
it's a temp bag. TEMP. Yeah.
Yeah, temp bag. Okay.
Yeah. Thermal emergency management program. Yeah.
Meeting for temp service. Okay, that sounds good. All righty, good. All right. Well, I was going to pick on Libby, but it looks like she's leaving us. So, but thank you, Libby, for always being here. She's fantastic.
I'm going to her jurisdiction tomorrow, and I'm meeting with her on Saturday, as a matter of fact.
Fantastic. See if she'll take you to the counter, or let's say Leonard's versus she'll take you to get some malasadas. I hope that'll be really great.
We're going to Kauai, so different island.
Ah, okay, cool. Okay, good. You'll have a great time there. Great. Oh, that's one of my favorites. There's so much cool stuff there. Well, good.
Hey, just real quick, Paul. So our athletic trainers have been using just a big blue tarp. We're trying to figure out how to deal with heat stroke inexpensively and reasonably, because they're obviously not going to be downloading, hundreds of pounds of ice at every football practice.
Right.
So they fill a big cooler with ice. And then if they need to use it, they just take a big blue tarp and kind of hold it like a burrito and fill it with ice, kind of what Dave's saying. We put the player in there and then we kind of slosh them back and forth with the ice and some water in there and cool. It actually works to cool them down pretty quickly.
I thought there was great ice supplies because it seemed like every other corner there is a Hawaiian ice store, right?
Yeah, but they're eating it.
That's right. That's a good
Maybe
point.
it's the taco method.
Yeah.
Taco.
Sorry, taco.
Yeah.
Taco.
Good. Get me a taco. All right. Well, that's a very cool approach. Sounds good. Thanks. Anything else to report though, Libby, out of Hawaii?
No, we're just getting ready for Tropical Storm Calvin. We're starting to feel some of the winds from it, but just hopefully just rain and some gusty winds up to about 45 to 55.
I hope so, because people don't think about hurricanes and cyclones, et cetera, hitting you, but you guys may be due for one, a bad one, and it could be significant to you. So, so it'll be could be catastrophic. So good luck with that. So I hope you get through it okay. And have you had flooding problems, by the way? I mean, you always had some flooding problems, but are you getting more than ever before nowadays?
Not recently, but that's what they're trying to prepare for with this. The government folks are clearing out the stream beds and removing vegetation and stuff because they're expecting a fair amount of rain, especially on the Big Island.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense a lot. All right. Well, cool. Okay, good. Ben Weston, I've been so bad. I wanted to put you on much earlier, but but anyways, hopefully you're going to have a topic for us coming up here pretty soon, I think, right?
I do have a topic coming up soon. It's escaping me at the moment, but I will have a topic. Oh, the new trauma triage guidelines, I think, is going to be the topic that we're working on.
Okay, good.
Kind of the nuances of that. So it should be interesting.
I'm going to tell you, when Ben came up with that thing and brought up to the forefront this whole issue for all of us about, postpartum care and the issues of, having a eclampsia, preeclampsia and eclampsia, whatever, all sorts of things long after the birth has taken place, that was a hot topic at the Eagles meeting. And you guys with David and Fiona, and I can't think there was someone else, maybe Joel, I can't remember who it was, but it was a fantastic presentation, and everybody really liked it a lot. It's just a fantastic it was just a great getting us back on there and making everybody aware of it. It just really was very good. So thanks a lot for getting that off the ground.
Oh no, thank you.
Okay, anything? How about you? You guys have had the heat, but you also had air quality issues there, right?
We had air quality issues. They're kind of more or less past. It kind of flares up every once in a while, but today's nice and 78 degrees and sunny, so can't complain.
Okay, fantastic then. All righty. Well, I'm trying to think if there was anything else that Kevin, you didn't have anything to report from the mothership, and I never asked Jim. I should have asked Jim and Mike to see if they had anything to report from their organizations, but nothing from your end, right?
No, nothing from my end. That's
Okay.
pressing.
And actually, I don't know how many people are going to, but I'm going to probably ask maybe Jim to put out a survey. I want to see who's going to Philadelphia for ACEP, because they're talking about giving us a room or something, and I'm going to find out a little bit more about that. But if no one's going, we tell them don't put aside a room for us, But if a lot of you are going, then I'd like to know about that, and we'll say, yeah, we'll take a room. We'll see. I'm going to understand what that's about. I think they're just giving us an opportunity to all get together sometime. I think that's what it is. So if there's enough of us, sure, we can get together. I'd rather get together in the bar, but I think that, but we'll see how it goes. We will formally put it out because they need to know here pretty soon. All right, anybody else want to pipe in, because it's already 5 o'clock, and I think we should get on to the next the next things that we have to do. And I'll welcome back everybody to the show that ever ends next Tuesday, where I'll be reporting from our nation's capital myself. So anybody else want to pipe in and have anything to add to the conversation today? Okay, well, if not, then I'll let everybody go, and thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Okay, really great seeing everyone, and my apologies to Ben for keeping you on until the end. Okay, so all right, good. I'll see you later then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. Bye, everyone.
See you, everybody.
Have a good day.